So it's about time I finally got to this, right? I've only talked so much about how I'd do this list eventually, so I had to follow through, right? So today we'll see what I believe are the biggest problems in gaming, and which games are most guilty and deserving of the Hall of Shame. Be warned, there may be spoilers. Also, things like bad controls and unplanned glitches go without saying. These are bad decisions made consciously and intentionally. Hall of Shame, the Mario franchise. To be more specific, lives themselves are not bad. In essence, NES-era games like Super Mario Bros. Often weren't that long, and if you know what you were doing, can be completed in about 20 minutes. Other games that used lives, like Donkey Kong or Mario Bros., were arcade games that are more about the high score. There wasn't a problem because it either was the only way the game would end, and it was getting a high score, or it extended the playtime and it wasn't hard, painful, or boringly tedious to get back to where you were. Many games still retain a live system even now. Super Mario 64 carried over lives. What was the penalty for losing your lives? You were just booted back to the castle yard and had to run back into the castle and traverse it all over again. Super Mario 64 was not short and did not need lives. Each death kicked you out of the level and reset mission objectives and coins. This was just an irritating annoyance. There is nothing difficult or interesting about running back to shifting sand lane every time you game over. Ultimately it becomes annoying and tedious, being kicked out of the level was all that needed to be done. Donkey Kong 64 and Banjo-Kazooie understood this, with death dropping you at the level start, except all mission objectives and collectibles didn't reset, but those levels were also way bigger. I enjoyed these games far more than Super Mario 64. When I got older, I understood why. Super Mario 64 only had a few checkpoints in its levels. If it had way more checkpoints, maybe lives would have worked better. Super Mario Sunshine and Galaxy kept the same problem, and neither added many checkpoints. In Sunshine's favor, Delfino Plaza was a very scalable and rompy area, so traversing it wasn't too terrible most of the time. And Super Mario Galaxy did add slightly more checkpoints, but not enough. Another sin the Mario franchise is guilty of in this respect comes in New Super Mario Bros., the DS game. Sure, it had the classic Mario feel, but it only allowed saving in castles, and was a handheld game. You know, with batteries that die, or threaten to die. New Super Mario Bros. Was not simple either. Enemies now would stop and pause to the beat of the music, which I still am not used to, and you tended to land in their face instead of on their head. The Donkey Kong Country remakes understood handhelds require more frequent saving. Why doesn't Mario? Hall of Shame, Pokemon, and the Mega Man franchise. Games often excel on giving you many options, all of which work, but have pros and cons. Then certain games give you something objectively superior. Pokemon does this with some fully evolved Pokemon having higher stats in every category and very useful type combinations, while others have below average stats and horrible typing. Certain Pokemon rise to the top and are better than others. The Mega Man series is also guilty of giving you imbalanced weapons, as well as having incredibly well-balanced weapons. There is infamously the Metal Blade that is overpowered often, and the less famous Leaf Shield that makes so many levels easier. You also have the Shadow Blade, and then more useless weapons like the Bubble Lead and the random Top Spin. On the other hand, games like Mega Man 6 have incredibly balanced arsenals with no single weapon outshining the others. Other Mega Man series also suffer from this problem sometimes. Take Battle Network. Some of the chips are just bad, but overall the chips are fairly balanced thanks to the chip codes, which often have less useful or less common codes for the stronger chips. I cannons can remain more useful than M cannons depending on your folder. Star Force then imbalances by removing coding for the most part. Once you get several version 3s of any attack, why would you have any use for the version 2s? You don't. Hall of Shame. Fire Emblem. Add stupid random number generator. Minigames that include any kind of luck or chance-based elements use random number generation. From a technical standpoint, you could be lazy and have a simple script pick a number between X and Y, setting X and Y to arbitrary numbers for your amusement, and then apply this value to other equations to decide how fortune will smile. The problem is most programming languages don't do this randomly and result in fairly predictable patterns. You could get around this by working in complex mathematical equations like calculus, possibly involving multiple RNGs that totally ruin any sense of pattern or logic, and then reduce it to a number into your defined range. From a technical standpoint again, a lot of RNGs generate strings of digits at certain points, and they remain unchanged until a new string is generated. These strings might even cycle if they are used long enough. On the other hand, it is possible to have a single random number generated on an interval, so if you were to save state, the outcome occurrence could change with every reload. I'll ask you now, which RNG sounds more enjoyable? Fire Emblem usually generates a string that doesn't change for long periods, and this string decides who hits, who criticals, who gets a stat increase on level up, and everything else. The problem is random numbers aren't always fun, and often little is done to compensate. Some Fire Emblems have low growth rates, and it's possible for the RNG to repeatedly give you no stat increases on level up, or allow you to miss 15 times in a row with a 99% hit rate, and the enemy to critical thrice with a 5% hit rate and a 1% critical rate. I've experienced both situations before. The first problem could easily be remedied by checking and ensuring a certain number of stats increase every level up. It could be a pain to program, but it prevents the player from feeling incredibly underleveled at max level due to very crappy RNG. The second also is possible, but not necessarily necessary. Sure, you calculate statistics and boost some of your numbers based on those statistics, but I don't know if it would be worth the developer's time. Hall of Shame. Mega Man. I kind of covered this in my reasons Mega Man 2 is overrated. You know the crappy first level of Wily's castle, where you need item 1 to progress. Then you know the final boss who needs the bubble lead to die, and everything else heals him. Mega Man 3 has a rush section with similar problems too. To an extent, some Fire Emblem games keep weapons scarce enough you could end up breaking all of your weapons if you try to get as much experience as possible, especially with crappy RNG wasting uses. You also have Sacred Stones that nearly averts the problem, then gives you Myrrh with an irreplaceable limited use item. Though she is kind of an overpowered secret weapon, but one who turns into a dragon, so you'll always want to deploy her, obviously. Also, you can use a glitch to armor with other weapons, but that wasn't intended. The issue isn't bad if it is always possible to replenish your supply of said consumable item, and Star Fox 64 and pretty much every Yoshi game are fine. You have to allow something else to solve the problem, or ensure the necessary item is always available, otherwise it becomes a problem. Hall of Shame, Fire Emblem, and Glover. Every once in a while, a game will require you to protect an NPC or an object. Somehow it seems like most of the time these characters you have to protect are actually in league with the enemy, or your character smells so badly they just want to die and be free. Or maybe they have a crippling fear of something. Occasionally it's more you are escorting or protecting your character in a bad stealth mission, and they suddenly have a ridiculous fear or weakness, and are vulnerable to anything. Think Wind Waker's searchlights, only sometimes you aren't unarmed, but your character suddenly acts that way. Fire Emblem is one of the worst with this. Despite having few formal escort missions, it's more of something you have to deal with if you want to recruit a character. A lot of neutral and ally units will pick unwinnable fights, or put themselves in dangerous situations instead of seeking your protection. And some of the enemy units you can turn love to pick unwinnable fights too. Yes, you can do it best, no damage. Go ahead and attack a unit who gets 2 attacks and has 100% hit rate, as well as high attack. The first map with allies in Path of Radiance. I did well and on my last turn figured, I can just let the allies do whatever they want, and I'll finish this up. Somehow, Leth got herself killed. If I controlled her directly, I couldn't have killed her if I tried. And yeah, that death counts. Hall of Shame, Paper Mario, the 1000-Year Door. Don't feel like designing a new level? Then let's just make the player run back and forth across a few screens about 5 times. A quarter of the level, all the playtime. The developers of Paper Mario, the 1000-Year Door seem hell-bent on earning their ticket to gaming hell by abusing this gaming sin. The game started okay enough until Chapter 4, the scary level, and in replaying it, it is indeed scary, for the wrong reasons. The path is full of tough enemies that are tough to avoid and annoying to fight. First you have to travel about halfway through the level to get a couple keys, then return to the starting town and get cursed. Now you can go all the way through the level and fight the boss. Instead of winning, he steals your identity and leaves you partnerless. Now you must head all the way back to the starting town without a partner. It's not uncommon to only stand a chance of making the journey if you somehow dodge all but a few enemies, due to how powerful and difficult they are to fight without a partner. Anyway, the boss confronts you before you reach town and challenges you to either fight or guess his name. You can't win against him, and you can't guess his name, so I hope every player has realized this and doesn't die here. You'll gain a new partner in town. Then you have to head all the way back through the level to find a missing keyboard letter so you can guess his name. You will ultimately find the missing letter and possibly hear a parrot utter his name if you've been paying attention. Now you must go back to the town to guess the boss's name. Upon guessing his name, guess what? Yes, he runs all the way back to the end of the level, and you must chase him. I'm exhausted just talking about this. So best case scenario, if you don't die or miss anything, you're traversing the entire level 5 times back to back. I hope you got all the things for the Trouble Center quests too. Or don't care about them. You might think the backtracking is done, but the very next chapter where you're stranded on a level unable to leave has you traverse the somewhat shorter path to the dungeon 3 times. And in the second chapter you had to go back close to the beginning to get a necklace, return it to the farthest end of the level, and go about halfway back to reach the dungeon. I don't find revisiting past locations bad or having an open area to explore as you wish. The desert and the toy box both were fine in the original Paper Mario. This is a linear path you are forced to go through 5.5 times. Hall of Shame, Fire Emblem, Genealogy of the Holy War. It's always annoying to have a character automatically killed, and it feels cheap. Many RPGs and even Pokemon have instant death, and sometimes it can be spammed. Sometimes a boss just has the ability to spam an attack that takes over half of your HP from all of your characters, but it is programmed to mix it up. It just happens sometimes it'll use it 10 times in a row while you desperately come up with the greatest healing plan possible, only to die anyway. That's just how the RNG rolls. Barring being far from the last save point, it just means you waste a lot of items. But what if a game doesn't allow revives? Or what if it is too early? Or the game never does, like in Fire Emblem? Surely instant death would never come into Fire Emblem. Sure, bad strategy can get your enemy a critical and potentially kill certain units, but not any unit. Surely minor enemies wouldn't have this power in a series known for permanent death. Well, not quite, but nearly. In Genealogy of the Holy War, and Tharkia, whatever, both Juggle games? Anyway, there's a spell called Hell. Wait, an equivalent but lower accuracy version exists in the Binding Blade known as Eclipse? As a quick note, Eclipse continued to exist in the other Game Boy Fire Emblems, but was changed to only take half. As I was saying, the spell Hell can reduce any character's HP to 1, which in Genealogy of the Holy War is basically a guaranteed death. There are just too many enemies, another one is going to attack, and every attack that hits does at least 1 damage. For now, let's just say this is the one Fire Emblem game you don't want this kind of baloney in. Also, Awakening did bring the assassin with the lethality skill, which is instant death, but was careful to keep minor enemies from having it, not to mention it has casual mode. Now I need to make a mental note to Google for instant death next time so I can be sure to pick casual mode for Fire Emblem. Enemies can do instant death? I'm out of the permadeath thing. Hall of Shame, Mega Man X Command Mission. Let me tell you a story full of spoilers for Mega Man X Command Mission. As soon as Spider joined my party, he was cool, and I never removed him from my party. His special move was playing poker. Topped that for a special move. I also equipped him with my item capture sub-weapons. Then without warning, he sacrificed himself and died. I didn't think, oh no, my item captures, and I saved after I stopped crying. Then later I realized he didn't remove them, and placed them in my inventory before dying, and now I have none, and I have to play Marino's slot machine to steal anything. You can only naturally get 3 item captures, and beyond that, they are very rare drops. There's a force medal to increase drop rates, but it is an even rarer drop from the same enemy. Yes, the same enemy drops an item to increase drop rates as well as the item capture. I knew none of this until recently, and was rightfully upset Spider stole my item captures. I lost my item captures and Spider for that fool. To make matters even worse, item captures are necessary for many force metal forging recipes, so you need all of them you can get. This phenomenon is also possible in Fire Emblem with a similar feeling of, I lost my Swift Soul, and my Myrmidon. Hall of Shame, Glory of Heracles. While many handheld RPGs and games allow saving anywhere, there's always a few who keep save points. This is one of the biggest faults with Mario and Luigi. RPGs often have long battles, so you can never take for granted the player may eventually run low on power. You have to develop your game with this in mind, and keep handheld and mobile games small doses of fun. The player has to be able to play for about 7 to 15 minutes and be able to quit without consequence, just in case the batteries are toward the end of their life. Then you have games that allow saving anywhere and then disable it randomly like Glory of Heracles. At several points the game will subject you to a series of battles, and that usually isn't too bad. Then the game also completely disables saving at several random points, and we aren't talking the normal, the final boss is in the next room, not being able to save. Partway through the game, you reach what may be the longest dungeon in the game, several different maps of long, winding paths in the sky, and you can't save at any point in this dungeon. I can only assume they feared you could cause some kind of glitch to end up permanently trapped. But you can't disable saving for a 40 to 90 minute dungeon on a handheld. That is way past acceptable. Do they know how stressful red lighting is? Hall of Shame, Banjo-Kazooie. In Banjo-Kazooie, it seemed like somebody was at gunpoint to give you things to collect. Mumbo tokens, jiggies, eggs, feathers, empty honeycombs, Jinjos, quest items, and notes. Most of the important collectibles like jiggies, empty honeycombs, and mumbo tokens stayed collected forever. Jinjos being only 5 did reset until you collected them all and stole their jiggy, and then notes. All 100 reset after every death and every time you left a level, and these notes are necessary to open doors. Since the notes are often spread throughout every nook of a level, including some of the deadliest for a jiggy sections, this basically asks the player to complete the level in one run without dying. Don't need to remind you this game is intended for children. You know, short attention spans, bad coordination, sticky hands, poor gaming skills if it isn't playing duck at a point blank range, and even then some kids miss half the ducks. The levels are just too big to require all 100 notes be collected from some of the later levels. Maybe if this was the Super Nintendo, but with the Nintendo 64, it's too much to cover. They could have even gone the Super Mario 64 route and put in over 100, so it's like collect 100 out of these 130 MacGuffins and have a good day, child. Not scour this level or reach a note door that holds you back like you'll be held back if your math grade doesn't improve. This isn't even the end of this kind of thing either. Just when you think it's gone, somebody does this again. Rare seems to have learned their lesson though with Donkey Kong 64 and Banjo-Tooie. Then forgot it shortly after and made Banjo-Kazooie without the fun, but now with the cars. That works, right? With problems like these in gaming, is it any wonder I'm terrified of blackouts, dead batteries, game-breaking experiences, and so many other things when I'm playing a video game? Episode question: what problem do you think plagues the development of games most?